What's up team? Welcome back to the channel. And on today's video, is another weekly running and training vlog. So at the end, I'll be telling you about my week of training, but primarily I want to hear about your week of running. What did you get up to last week? I want to hear about your successes, and I definitely want to hear about your setbacks. And this video is pretty much going to follow the same format as every other weekly running and training vlog. I'm going to talk about something running related, and then my week of training is going to come at the end. And I do it this way, so if you guys don't want to hear about my training, you can just click off. No hard feelings here. At least the first part of the video, I like to put in something that maybe you'll learn something, maybe you'll have something that you already know confirmed. Either way, I think both of those things are pretty valuable. But for this week's study, well, I came across the study from an article in Canadian Running. And the article is titled Fight Fatigue by Working on Your Hamstrings and Posture. And my friends, when it comes down to it, I think fighting fatigue is something that all of us are training to do. No matter what level we're at, we are all trying to fight fatigue, to become more fatigue resistant. Because if we become more fatigue resistant, it means we can run faster for longer. And even if you're not out there racing, if you're just out there running because you enjoy running every day, being less fatigued is going to make your runs more enjoyable, and it's going to make the rest of your life more enjoyable. And I'll even go so far to say that even if you're not a runner, becoming more fatigue resistant is going to benefit you in every area of your life. And this Canadian Running article was based on a study that was published in March 2022. So it's brand new, we like that. And the study is titled Higher Hamstrings Strength and Stability Are Related to Lower Kinematics Alteration During Running After Central and Peripheral Fatigue. It's kind of a mouthful. Also, the conclusion is given away in the title. But we're going to drag this out just a little longer to explain what the study did and actually let you know the results that they found. So the researchers looked at two different types of fatigue. They looked at peripheral fatigue and central fatigue. Now, peripheral fatigue is the one that you are probably most used to feeling. That's the fatigue that you get when you go out and you run. It's kind of the outer fatigue that you feel in your muscles. So basically, after you've been running for a long time, you're going to have peripheral fatigue. And central fatigue refers to fatigue in your central nervous system. Now that's a little harder to pin down, but both of these types of fatigue, they can affect muscle strength and your running form. And you know what, on the surface, we all know this. Right? We all know that when we start getting tired, maybe our form starts to get a bit sloppy. How many of you have been late in a race and all of a sudden you're feeling like you're just not picking up your feet enough? Maybe your shoulders are starting to bunch up, and that's when we sort of shake it out. And while it's easy to kind of shake out your shoulders, it's a lot harder at the end of a race to start picking up your feet a little more. But if you've raced, I'm sure you've been there. And for a lot of us, that fatigue is actually why we race. It's fun to kind of push our bodies to the limit. But wouldn't it be nice to not reach that limit before the end of the race? I think it would be very nice. Okay, so this fatigue, whether central or peripheral, it's not only going to slow you down, it's also going to put you at a higher risk for injuries. And researchers have shown that your increase for injury increases because your ground reaction forces increase as you get tired. So when you get tired, you're not running with that spring in your step that you did at the beginning of the race. You're kind of pounding the ground a lot harder. And of course, we all know this, we want our legs to be like springs. When our foot hits the ground, we want that energy to return back to us, to propel us forward. We don't want all that energy to be lost in the ground. Many of us pay a lot of money for carbon-plated shoes because they give us more ground reaction forces that are returned back to us. Back in 2017, the Nike 4% actually put a number on the amount of energy returned to us. But my friends, if you're willing to pay that money to have that extra energy returned to you through your running shoes, research has also shown that strength training can add up to 8%. Research has also shown that strength training can also give you 8% more energy return. So of course, I'd rather take that 8% energy return than the 4% from the shoes. And the 8% is free. All I have to do is put in a bit of gym time. I don't even have to go to the gym. I can do all this stuff right at home. But now I'm thinking that if I did that, if I spent more time doing strength training so I could increase my energy return from the ground, and then I put on a pair of super shoes, well, now I'm up to 12% energy return. And that sounds like a pretty good thing. And ultimately, we want this energy return because it results in us putting out less energy. That means our energy cost is less for traveling the same distance. So we can either run faster or we can last longer on our runs. Oh, and of course, I will link to the Canadian Running article and the study in the show notes below. And if you are interested in reading the study, the link that I will have down below links to the entire study. So you can read all about it. Okay, this study used 18 male runners with an average age of 28 years. They had an average VO2 max of 62.2, and they had to run regularly, which was defined as at least 2 times a week for the last year. And I'm not going to get into exactly how they measured the fatigue, how they induced the fatigue, but in a nutshell, they worked out the participants' maximum aerobic speed. Then they gave them a couple of days off. Then they started the testing. And of course, in the testing, they warmed up first, then they performed a strength test, and then they did the fatigue protocol. And basically, they had to move their legs against weight to fatigue the muscles. There was also a running fatigue test where they ran at 85% of their maximum aerobic speed. And then once the fatigue testing was done, they redid the measurements to see how they changed. And the results, much like the title suggested a few minutes ago, found that runners with higher hamstring strength resulted in fewer modifications after fatigue. So what that means is when you're running and you feel fresh in the beginning and then you don't feel fresh as the run goes on, the runners that had higher hamstring strength felt better for longer. Their gait wasn't modified because of their fatigue. Now this next part I found pretty interesting because a lot of times we finish a run, especially if we're running a lot of downhills, and our quads get thrashed. But the study found that the body's ability to absorb ground reaction forces decreases as fatigue increases. So when we go out in the beginning of a run, we're feeling pretty good, we're able to just bound along, we're all springy, our body is able to soak up those ground reaction forces very well. But as we get fatigued, our body doesn't soak them up as well. I know that doesn't sound very scientific, but it's what happens. So when our hamstrings get fatigued, the hamstring quadricep activation ratio is modified in favor of the quadriceps. So when that ratio of hamstring to quads switches in favor of the quads, that also causes our knee angle to increase. And when that knee angle increases, it does indeed lower the impact forces of every time our foot hits the ground. But when our knee angle changes, so does angles in our hip and our ankle dorsiflexion. So when these things change, we're getting out of line. We're not running how we normally would. And while these changes are our body trying to protect itself by lowering the impact forces, there is a metabolic cost. And it's been shown that your volume of oxygen is going to increase by 25% for every 5-degree increase in your mid-stance knee flexion angle. So mid-stance is when your foot hits the ground. That's right in the middle. So basically you want stronger hamstrings so we don't have to switch to being a quad-centric runner. And then we avoid all those angles changing just slightly, which makes an increased need for oxygen. And if you've ever run a race, you know that at the end of a race, you're already in need of oxygen. There's no need to do anything to increase that need. So ultimately, I guess if you strength train, if you train your hamstrings to be stronger, you are going to use less oxygen. Not quite sure if that's what the study concluded, but it seems like a fair analysis from this layman. So before the study began, the researchers did hypothesize that central fatigue would cause greater changes than the peripheral fatigue, and the results supported their hypothesis. So remember, our central fatigue is in our central nervous system. And to me, as a non-scientist, seems a little counterintuitive because every time I go out, my muscles get tired, my outside, my periphery. So naturally, I would assume that that's the thing holding me back, but it is not holding me back nearly as much as my central fatigue. So I want to know from you guys, how many of you actually work on your hamstrings when you do your strength training? Off the top of my head, I'm thinking glute bridges, hamstring walkouts. I think I made a video about that a while ago. If I can find it, I'll link to it right up here. And then of course, if you have an exercise ball, you could put your feet up on that and kind of move it back and forth, give those hammies a good workout. Alright guys, well, I had a pretty good week of running. My week started off on the cruise ship, the Wonder of the Seas. Maybe you saw the video that I did, the video review and me running around the ship. So for the first couple of days of the week, I was there. And on Monday, I knocked out 10.2 miles, very easy, just running around the track on the ship. Now, if I remember right, I think 10 miles was 24 laps. And let me tell you, running 24 laps around the ship, it's not as easy as it seems. Of course, what is easier than it seems is what I do after the run. Because I was on holiday, all I had to do was recover, which was very easy with an unlimited source of food and a vacation attitude where I didn't care as much what I put into my body. Tuesday was a workout day. I did this workout on the treadmill on the ship just because with people walking on the track, it was too difficult to really pick up the pace. But I warmed up for 1.5 miles. Then I did 4 1.5 mile intervals with 800 meters recovery in between. And after that was done, I cooled down for 2 miles. Wednesday was another 10.1 miles, very easy. So another 24 laps around the ship. Then on Thursday was another workout day, warmed up for 1 mile. Then I did 2 4-mile blocks at tempo pace with 800 meters recovery in between. And then when that was done, I cooled down for 1.5 miles. Friday was a day off, mainly because I was getting off the ship in the morning and then I had to drive a couple hours to get home. Then I had to jump through all those hoops that you have to do when you come back off a holiday. I want to say hoops after holiday, I'm really just talking about the washing. There was a lot of washing to be done. But I got all that squared away on Friday, and on Saturday I managed to knock out 15.1 miles. That was my long run for the week. Now some of you may be thinking, Matt, you're training for Boston. Why are you only running 15 miles as your long run? Well, it's by necessity. I did have to go to work at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning, so that means I had to get up pretty early just to run 15 miles. So every other week it's usually a little longer, a more marathon training appropriate distance. But because that's all I could do, I was actually very happy with squeezing in 15.1 miles on that Saturday. And then I wrapped up the week with 7.7 miles, quite easy, but I did go over to the golf cart overpass in the country club near my house, and I ran back and forth 23 times just to get a little altitude. Maybe altitude is the wrong word to use, because I would say that it's about 8 or 9 feet gain each way. So that's actually between 363 to 414 feet of gain on that run. Which I know, for those of you that live in a hilly location, that is absolutely nothing. But for me, it's pretty happy with that. 300 feet of gain. I'm a regular mountain man. And with that final run, it brought my week's total to 65.15 miles, or about 104.85 kilometers. So a pretty solid week. I have one more big training week before I start the taper into Boston. All right, my friends, don't forget to let me know about your week of running. I want to hear all about it. Also, remind me if you are training for something specific coming up. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.